What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, I am going to teach you guys everything that you need to know about identifying when it is time to rebuild in Dynasty Fantasy Football and how to expedite that rebuild so you can get back to competing as quickly as possible. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into my 5 tips for rebuilding your Dynasty Fantasy Football rosters. So the first tip that I have for you guys is how to identify when it is time to rebuild. And the best thing that you can do for your Dynasty Fantasy Football teams is to be very self-aware about where you stand in your Dynasty League's potential standings. I need you to go out. I need you to look at all of the teams in your league. Be very critical when you are looking at these teams. Be very critical when you are looking at your team, because I need you to be able to identify where you stand. Take time to consider different scenarios. Where would your team be if you had an injury to a running back? Where would your team be if this player didn't pan out the way you thought they were going to be this year? Consider these scenarios, because when it's all said and done, for you to be a true contender in your Dynasty Fantasy Football leagues, in 10-man leagues, you probably need to be a top 4 team. And in 12-man leagues, I'm going to say that you need to be a top 5 team. So if you are not a top 4 or a top 5 team, depending on your league size, it may be time to start considering a rebuild, or it may be time to start at least entertaining the ideas of rebuilding. Now, my second piece of advice for you is going to be to identify your roster's cornerstones. These are going to be players on your team that have young, high upside, longevity for your roster. And when I say that, I'm going to say, look at these guys with 2 to 3 year windows. You want players who are either going to still be in their prime 2 to 3 seasons from now, or be entering their prime 2 to 3 seasons from now. Some of these guys are going to be guys like Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, and so on. Now, when you look at these players, you're going to notice that we are not talking running back. Running backs are not going to be a cornerstone piece for your roster. You are not going to be building around these players in 2 to 3 seasons. Running backs come in and out of your roster so quickly, and if you are rebuilding, they will be the last piece that you put together in your hopes to become a contender, so they'll be the last thing that you buy. Do not worry about who you are rostering at the running back position when you are rebuilding, because that is a position of least importance during your rebuild. Now, my third tip for you is going to be liquify and disperse. And what I mean by that is, when you are identifying these cornerstones on your roster, you're obviously going to come across the players who are not cornerstones. These may be Austin Eckler's, Joe Mixon's, Saquon Barkley's. They could even be Keenan Allen's, Matthew Stafford's. You're going to have players like that where you know, hey, they are not a part of the long-term plans. They're not a cornerstone on my roster. And these are guys that I need to sell now, because I need to liquefy and disperse my assets. So what I mean by that is, you are going to want to take that Saquon Barkley, or you're going to want to take that Matthew Stafford, and you're going to want to trade them away. You're going to find one of these teams that you've already identified as a contender in your league. You're going to go to them because they're going to be the most likely buyer. Now, you're going to look for things on their team that are going to be valuable to you long term. Keep in mind, keep thinking about that 2 to 3 year window. Your championship window may be 2 seasons from now. So which players are going to have the most value in those years? Find those assets. And rather than taking a Saquon Barkley and making a 1-for-1 trade straight across for a guy like Travis Etienne, who is being equally valued to him in the Dynasty community on Keep Trade Cut, do not make that 1-for-1 trade, because at the end of the day, you are trying to create as much depth and create as much upside as possible, because you want as many chances to hit on a possible cornerstone player long term throughout your rebuild. So just like I said, you're not going to want to trade a guy like Saquon 1-for-1 for Travis Etienne. But what you may be able to do is, you can go to a manager and say, okay, look, what I want to do is I want to give you Saquon Barkley. You're a contender, you can use him, and you might have a need at running back. Now, I'm going to give you Saquon, and you're going to give me Brandon Ayuk, a player who I think is going to still be good for 2, 3, 4, 5 more seasons, right? Now, we're not looking at 5-year windows, but we do want to look in those 2 to 3. So I'm going to go get a guy like Brandon Ayuk, and I'm going to have him throw in a second and or a third asset as well. A second asset could be a guy like Tank Bigsby. So now you're getting Brandon Ayuk and Tank Bigsby for Saquon Barkley. Or if you don't want to add a running back, because I said they are going to be the last pieces on the roster that you want to fill out in a rebuild, you could go to them and say, hey, give me Brandon Ayuk and give me an early 2024 second. Maybe they have a pick from a team that doesn't look like they're going to be very competitive this year, and you say, hey, throw me that pick with Brandon Brandon Ayuk, and now you have 2 assets for your 1 asset, increasing your chances to hit on one of these cornerstone players. So you're going to go through your roster, and you're going to do that with your aging veterans or the players that are not fitting that mold of your rebuild timeline. As you're doing that, you're going to notice that there are players that are going to be hard to trade, or they're going to be players that are not worth trading at the moment. So my 4th tip is going to be stay active in trade markets all year long. In a rebuild, you could argue that is the most important time for you to be active in a dynasty league, because that is when you are trying to make the most change to your dynasty rosters. Now, I mentioned that you may have guys that are hard to trade right now, and you are going to have guys on your roster that are going to fluctuate in value as the season goes on. An example of this is going to be possibly a guy like Elijah Mitchell. Now, you could go sell Elijah Mitchell right now for anything you can get. I would assume that the most you can get for a guy like Elijah Mitchell right now is going to be a 3rd round pick. Maybe you can get a 2nd round pick, but it's going to be late, and it's probably a couple years down the road from the CMC manager for Elijah Mitchell. But like I said, you're going to have guys fluctuate. So if you have Elijah Mitchell on your roster, you might consider holding Elijah with the possibility that later down the road, maybe he gets worked in a little bit more in the 49ers offense. Maybe CMC has an injury, and now Elijah Mitchell is a hot commodity on the waiver wires, or even just in the trade markets in general, because Elijah Mitchell is now getting 20 carries a game for the 49ers. So at that point, you are going to want to capitalize on these deals. So make sure that you are identifying players who can fluctuate in value, and make sure that you are trying to find the right window to trade them in. Obviously, at the end of the day, you do not want to be just holding assets throughout a rebuild. You do want to start moving off of some of these assets, liquefying them and dispersing them, but also be smart about how and when you are trading these assets to get the most out of your potential trade partners. Now, the 5th and final tip that I'm going to give you guys is become a bargain hunter. And what I mean by this is look across your league. There's players every single season that this happens to, where they get discounted because of unforeseen circumstances. Maybe there's an injury to a player. Maybe they get a suspension. Maybe there's something off the field going on. Find these players, and specifically find players that you believe that these circumstances are going to improve, or they are going to change long term, because you are thinking further than this season. Identifying these types of players and going and buying them at a discount is the best way to gain excess value long term in your dynasty fantasy football leagues and in your dynasty fantasy football rebuilds. So a great example that I would be using in a rebuild this year would be Kyler Murray. If you were a team where you had a aging quarterback and you knew that the team that has Kyler Murray is in a championship window, they need quarterbacks that can help them win a championship now. You can go to that Kyler Murray manager, give them a Dak Prescott and a small piece or something like that, and go get Kyler Murray and buy Kyler Murray's injury, because you know that long term Kyler Murray is more valuable than Dak Prescott. So you're going to get him at a discount, wait until he's healthy, and then you will get a healthy Kyler Murray when you are ready to compete. So finding these types of discounts are the best way to gain value in dynasty fantasy football. Another example would possibly be a Jameson Williams. If you can go get Jameson Williams because somebody is a little scared to hold through the suspension and you can get a discount on that, it's worth going to buy that and take on a little bit of that risk, maybe just short term, because you're not trying to win short term. And the best time to find some of these deals is as you approach your trade deadline, because you are going to get contending teams who are desperate to make a final push to get their way to a dynasty fantasy football championship. So you might get the best deals as you get to that deadline, buying high upside, young, injured players or suspended players, and really becoming a bargain hunter. So ladies and gentlemen, that is my 5 tips for how to identify when to rebuild and how to do it properly and expedite your rebuild process. If you found the content today actionable, something that you can take with you, go ahead and leave a like on the video, subscribe, comment, do all the stuff that help us out in the YouTube algorithm, because at the end of the day, that is what helps small channels like ours grow. And what we want to do is help people win as many dynasty fantasy football championships as possible, and we need to reach more people to do that. So make sure you're doing those things for us. We really appreciate it. Lastly, if you want to join our Discord, it is free to join. It is going to be linked in the description. It is also going to be in the YouTube banner or in our about page. Really, anywhere you can find it, it's going to be linked there. We've put it all over the place, so it's hard to miss. And if you do join that Discord, there is a roster strategy channel in that Discord where we help people through rebuild process. So go ahead and post some screenshots in there. We can help you rebuild. It has direct access to me. I'll be able to help you guys throughout the process as well. I don't have anything else for you guys today. I will see you guys on the next video. Peace out.